talk about summertime in York County, trolley whistles, bugs, and screens. A little bit about me, I'm a high school history teacher. I go back to school in a week and a half. I actually have to work for my paycheck again. But I do love summertime. I have a blog called Wandering in York County, and then I co-run a website with Jim McClure called Witnessing York. And then Dami now and I are into year 2 of Hometown History.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Season 2.
Season 2.
Yeah, and I'm a Civil War reenactor in my free time. I'm the 3rd Circuit Court of Appeals librarian for the Middle District of Pennsylvania, and I founded the Preserving the History of Newberrytown Facebook group.
And she's getting interviewed tomorrow for the Facebook group.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So,
how many members now?
We're almost at 4,000 members,
Woo!
So I'm super excited.
More
That's
people
more than Newberrytown has people.
Oh, I love that. So today we are fortunate enough to be in person at the New York Wire Works. This is an amazing building. So we're going to talk about the transformation of where we are today. If you're not here in person with us, so thank you to the live audience for being here.
Yeah.
But stop down. They are open most days throughout the day, and they have a lot of cool things here. And it is right in downtown York.
You could spend a whole day walking around the building.
I mean,
it's amazing.
really, it's beautiful what they've done. So today's agenda, we're going to take about 30 minutes. We're going to start talking about in the 1800s how horses were prevalent in York County, and we used a lot of the horsehair for fabric in couches and other clothing. Then that changed with the Industrial Revolution to more metal and wire, and how it changed into screens, the screening industry and how it impacted York County and the world, and then finish with today, the remaking of this space and how it has changed over time. So the takeaways. So as a teacher, we like to talk about the important lessons. One is that don't let a crisis go to waste. Look for opportunity when bad things happen. Another one is we try to have vision and use activities and change things to reuse it. Next one is York Wire Company was at the top of its class. We're so used to York County, just like the company down the street. It's not really a big name, but the York Wire Company was internationally known. And then finally, support local businesses. Come on down and support the neighbors that are selling things right down the street. So a lot of the work that we are using from today comes from Robert Horn. He wrote this book on the history of the building that we're in. That is available at the History Center, so you can go and read it firsthand. And then there's an excerpt in there from Robert Turner Jr. from 1950, which we also pull a lot of work from. So Dami and I, we are historians. We do primary research, but a lot of our work, though, is based off of the shoulders of others. So huge shout out to them for all their work that they do. So to start out, I have a lovely picture of my living room. And you might be thinking, why do I have a picture of a couch with 3 men for my living room? Well, this was actually a book club. Dami and I, and basically our friends, are part of this book club. And this is a picture of us hanging out. And the couch is made of specific fabric that I've had this couch now for like 10 years, right? I've had to clean it a few times.
It's a nice couch.
Thank you, thank you. But it's like a felt kind of fabric. When you think of home and your home fabric, what was your home fabric made of? Is there animal hair in there?
Not anymore, I don't think. But there used to be, so we're going to talk about the hair cloth of the 1800s. So imported from South America, this was woven into fabric made of cotton or linen. And it was called Peerless Hair Cloth Company. So hair cloth was strong and long-wearing fabric, and it had a sheen that emulates silk. So it created a look of richness at a fraction of the cost of silk, but you still got the same look. And it was used for parlor sofas in the middle and upper middle class families.
And a lot of the fabric, the hair that we got came from Latin America, but we had a lot of horses right here in York County.
Yes.
And then here's some clothing too. So we were looking around.
Clothing,
We were looking around some old newspapers, and we found this one from the Semi-Weekly Gazette from 1896, and it shows you a girl's costume. And if you look at it, it says in there that there is hair cloth in there. So she was wearing horsetails. Really?
I mean, and that was probably very fashionable for the time.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if it looked like silk, but it was durable, and it lasted a long time, that was probably, the thing you wanted to wear.
Horses were a big deal in the area. Dami and I always try to put in Lewis Miller paintings in our work.
We love him.
He was a painter in the early 1800s, and what we love about him is that he just painted everyday life happenings.
Yes.
So here is a picture of a horse in a carriage blazing through someone's fence. It's like the old-time car through the driveway, or car through the like front yard, you know, someone's carriage.
Hitting your mailbox,
But horses were used to pull wagons, to plows. Before we had tractors, before we had automobiles, so horses were common in York County.
Yeah.
It also means, though, that horses attract flies.
Yes.
And it wasn't just the horses, too. We're not demonizing horses here. We love horses. It was
Livestock
also
in general.
exactly livestock, food waste, human waste. We don't have the infrastructure that we have today. Horses still today, though, are pretty common. So I'm an agricultural historian, and I found that if you look at the census from community value products, York is first in the entire state for horses, ponies, mules, burros, and donkeys.
Really? I would have thought it would be Lancaster County.
Yeah, no, that's
interesting.
What it is. And it kind of makes sense when next time you're driving home or you're driving through the country, how often do you go past a barn that has blue signs, like be careful of equestrian life, you can get sick from it, but horses are pretty common.
Very common.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I love this picture.
That's very cool. Another Lewis Miller picture.
Yeah, a woman was trying to get off of a horse, because again, you rode horses, and her dress got caught in the saddle.
No.
And
It's not very ladylike.
I know, but luckily a man was nearby and like ran up to protect her purity, I guess, and put his hat like over her.
Thank
no one
goodness
could
for
see.
big hats.
I know. And so horses, because they were common and flies were common, this is before screens and before air conditioning, so we would be right now sitting in a space with the windows open, flies were coming in.
Right.
There was a home in York County called the Marshall House, and rumor has it they had a young woman that they hired full-time that would stand out beside you when you were eating, that when the flies got on you, she would brush away the flies. Like that was her job.
Talk about obsolete jobs.
Right? Training the next
I mean, if you
generation.
think about all the people looking for work today,
Yeah.
maybe you could hire a fly swatter, a human fly swatter.
If a fly got in your soup or in your gravy, you simply fished it out and kept on eating. I'm not saying I've never done that. It depends what I'm eating.
Routine.
But yeah, it was common practice. I found another newspaper from 1892 from the York Daily.
I love this.
Right? It
This
says,
is so funny.
flies and human beings, war to the death has been waged for centuries.
They're not wrong.
Like, you talk about, though, the news exaggerating. It's a little like war,
I mean,
death.
It was a little more boring back then. They didn't have TV, so they had to paint a picture for you.
Yep, buy the newspaper.
Yeah.
But they tell a story of a farmer's wife, and I'm going to read it. A farmer's wife pleasantly lures the fly into glass cisterns of sweetened water, where it can die like a rose in aromatic pain.
Beautiful. Beautiful wordsmith right
This
there.
journalist should have been a writer. Hopefully they were.
Maybe there's a book about flies and
Yeah.
we just haven't found it yet.
Yes.
So that brings us into the need for insect wire. So if you can't have a human fly swatter at your disposal every day, if that's not in your budget, you could get insect wire. So flies were everywhere by the millions and billions. That's a quote. So John W. Eisenhart had horsehair looms, and same spot and new factory retooled. And he converted them from horsehair looms to metal wire in 1888. So this is the progress of industry in the county in New York, and we're moving from just horsehair into wire now. And Eisenhart lived only blocks away from the loom factory, so that was perfect for him. He was right down the street from where he was working.
I get to see it.
Yeah.
And we also want to highlight, and this is what the New York Wire Works is doing today. In this exact building we're in right here, they took horsehair and they made fabric. Then he saw a need to take those same looms and transfer it into metal.
Right.
And so then he started making wire screens, all within the same place, and we still use screens today. Horsehair fabric maybe is out, but we still have screens on our windows here.
Yeah, I mean, they're just as relevant today as they were then. We might be using them for slightly different reasons, but they're still keeping the flies out of your house.
I will say though, my husband and I just went to Spain, and in Europe, they don't have screens.
Okay.
They just don't have screens on things,
Interesting.
which is odd at first.
Yeah.
They also, in a lot of places, didn't have air conditioning, which, and it
Yes.
was hot.
Yeah,
It
you
was
were there
hot.
during a heat wave.
Yeah, 1990s, just like laying in bed, like sweating,
I
you
know.
know.
I know.
They didn't really have though an insect problem like we have here.
Different climate.
Yeah, climate, and it's very different. So this is what's interesting. Dami and I want to take a second to talk about how we do our research. So we found that wire was commercially sold for the first time in 1857. And sometimes we take for granted those dates of just being able to Google something or open an encyclopedia. But someone a long time ago figured this date out because they put together a piece of a puzzle. So what happened was they were trying to research the history of wire, and they're trying to figure out how far back that they can find. They found a picture of the White House from the Civil War, and guess what was in the windows?
Wire screens.
Wire screens. And so now we know for sure that it predated the Civil War. And I know our audience is looking at us like we're a bunch of nerds. It's so exciting, guys. There's a picture of wire from the Civil War. And now we know it.
To us, though, and I love the Civil War, so that's a new fact that I can tell people.
Well, and as teachers, we don't want to teach backup education. So, for example, if your school teachers taught you to memorize the presidents in order, that's awesome, but also kind of a waste of time. You can Google that. It's something that you can find on your phone. But it does help, though, when you do know dates and you do know names. You don't have to know it, but in that case, it does help.
Oh, and you can remember when Abraham Lincoln was there, he had wire screens.
There you go. See? Yes.
It's a way to remember the order of the presidents.
Yeah. So we just wanted to highlight this investigative history and how we find out timelines and dates. Another thing, too, to showcase this change in York County that was happening when we switched from heirlooms to wire screens was the farmers markets that were down in downtown. So this was a sketch from 1876, and this was before we had shopping centers and grocery stores. And so again, farmers relied on horses not only to grow their agriculture, but then also to bring their crops and their produce to the downtown for people to purchase. So these were the market sheds that were in downtown that are no longer there because in the middle of the night in 1887, about 20 men approached the sheds and deconstructed it with no permits, no one knowing, no approval. The theory was that the old squawking hens and the filth of the horses coming in, it just was no longer wanted in York County. We were entering the modern era, the industrial era, and again, this is when Eisenhart is going to switch over from horses to wire screens. So we just want to use this as another kind of symbol and metaphor of the changes happening in the area. Here's another picture of the downtown to see the change after the market sheds were removed.
Very differently.
Very different. You can see the trolleys that were there, and then the kiosks that you can still see in the downtown that they've renovated that you can go and see. It looks very different.
It does, yes, much more wide open. People aren't crammed together anymore. So that brings us to 1892. So the New York Wire Cloth Company was purchased in 1892, and it was a big company. Like we said before, this was an internationally known company. So it had other locations, not just here in York City, and it consolidated and came to York. So why do you think they closed their other plants? Why do you think York City was the place to be?
Well, it makes me wonder, like little old York.
I know.
And this international company in New York, which is where the name New York Wire Company comes from, but they chose York County. We narrowed it down to 3 reasons.
Yes, so close to a railroad would be number 1. Number 2 would be more effective than other plants.
Our workers worked hard. They busted their butts.
They thought the work ethic here in York County was just superior to what they had in other locations. And then, luck, we didn't burn it down. Other plants had burned down, and for whatever reason, York survived. We were tough.
Our takeaway here is we're trying to, again, build culture through the hometown history episodes. York, we were hub for manufacturing. We had this geographical proximity to other locations. We know how to work hard. And thank you, fire departments. You keep us safe, and the ambulance. So
shout out to our first responders then and now.
So the headquarters remained in New York. Here is a picture of the owners and how they had a personal plane. You can see the name of the company.
Fancy.
They would fly down to York, check it out, and fly back home in New York. So we have this new technology then that's still emerging. Eisenhart and then the New York Wire Company is very good at this vision, always changing, which we still see here today. So we have the steel bar loom, which is based off of centuries-old wood looms. And I think this is interesting too, is a lot of inventions are just a build off of something else. It's progress and change. It's not just something brand new. So we took old wood looms, now we had steel looms, and so they had these giant spools of fine metal wires that they used to thread through a frame and heddles. So they separated, you've all seen the looms where they have these screens and how they will open it and then thread through a shuttle wire, and then it would close and switch and it would go back through. The same technology was used right here for these metal wires, the screens. And what's cool about the wireworks we're here today is they kept a lot of those looms. You can see them firsthand, and they have spools of wire everywhere. So they've kept
very cool.
Us historians love that they embrace the history. In one of the rooms that they had here, there were 75 looms in one space.
That's huge.
Before air conditioning.
I couldn't imagine.
And the machines running everywhere.
I know, warm today.
I know.
There's air running here.
So here's some of the pictures that we took while we were here scoping the place out. So you can see that they've maintained a lot of the looms that you can see firsthand. Also, shout out to the History Center. They do a lot of work to preserve our history.
Yes, they do.
The Agriculture and Industrial Museum is open to the public. They also have one of the looms that you can see.
Yeah, so go check them out after you look around this property. So we're going to transition into the mechanics of rebuilding these looms. So we're going to talk about William F. Kinsing. So he was a machinist and he repaired things and he built things, and he ended up traveling all across the country selling looms to other communities. So he was taking it out of York and he was taking it across the country. He took it to Glen Rock, Hanover, Spring Grove, and Mount Bluff. So he was building on our local industry and the method. So he called on farmers and prominent people and he told them about the wonders of what wire cloth could do for them. And he sold the looms and he took partial payment in stock, and then he moved on. And he ended up selling equipment not just across the United States, but he went to Germany, Canada, and Australia as well. And he was considered the father of modern insect wire screening industry. So, I mean, that's a title that I wouldn't really think of, but hey, good for him.
And so how do we teach this mindset? How,
Right.
because like in school, you know, we teach kids to be kind of employees, to sit down and do their work and do their homework and hand it in and show up on time. And here was this machinist, William, who was working on these looms and then said, ding, 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 if I go and sell others on the profitability of looms,
Yes.
and then take partial payment as a shareholder in their business, then he made money off of this.
He was ahead of his time. He had that entrepreneurial spirit
Right.
and drive, and to expand it not only in central Pennsylvania, but to other countries as well.
Right. So how can we teach this? I remember I did a project at the end of last year where my honors kids, I asked them to read a book and create a product and teach it to the class. And they freaked out. These honors kids wanted the rubric, they wanted the dates, they
How do
wanted
I
the
do
point.
it?
And I'm like, create something, guys, just create something. I'll be really lenient with the grades. I'll make it like 20 points, like not very much. Just push yourself and try something different. And it was like a robot glitching. They're like,
It's hard. I think in modern education, we box the kids in a lot. It's
Yeah.
very structured, and I think sometimes when we say, you know, just use your creative mind,
invent
go wild.
something,
Yeah.
try it.
Yeah.
They're scared of risk.
It is,
you know.
yeah.
So we're trying to teach that.
And this
Go
gentleman took the risk, and it paid off. He was very successful.
Yeah. So we also want to highlight the people working these looms. So here is what the people would have looked like around 1910 that were employed down in Hanover. And it's interesting too that usually you think of women as seamstresses and working in the sewing factories and being able to like make fabrics. And then you
Yes.
think of men as the factory workers, you know, who go to work.
Well, we learned from a previous episode that we did on weaving that weaving was actually a man's job, especially in central Pennsylvania and York County. So here we're taking something that we would think would be a feminine job, but then we're industrializing
Yeah.
it. So it gave a place for men and
And
women to
women.
work in the same industry.
Also, another shout out to Hanover, the famous Manhattan Project during World War II that developed the atomic bomb. Their screens were used in the development of the Manhattan Project.
Way to go, Hanover.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Here is the changing demographic then. In 1935, we're going to see a lot more men in this picture. Still
Yes.
women, though, are involved. And then, one of the most famous things that they created was this concept of selvage.
Okay.
So, you know when you have a favorite sweater and one of the strings kind of comes off,
Yes.
and all of a sudden it starts
It just-
unweaving?
Completely, yeah.
That was happening to the screens that were being made in York, and so they came up with the idea of selvage, which is where you just take a wire, wrap at the end, almost like a box frame, and you take the wires and you wrap it around it, and so it secured it so it was all in place.
Very smart.
Yeah.
Thank goodness, though, because I wouldn't want my screens to
To unravel,
Yeah.
until you're locked out of your house, and it happened to me last week.
And I had your spare key and you didn't call me.
Yeah, and the screens were so tight, we had trouble getting in, but
You had a really well-made screen.
and it took us about 10 minutes, but we finally broke in. Not going to tell you how because I don't want anybody breaking into my house, but we were able to do it.
Lock your windows.
So 1920s, the factory is expanding. So here are some really neat pictures of, again, where we are right now and how it has changed over time. Here are the workers.
That's amazing.
Is it cool?
It's such a large-scale project.
OSHA did not exist.
No, so many violations in one photograph.
Yeah. And there's the last one. And you can see these again at the History Center. They have these all on display. So I'm going to skip this publish these for you on your own later, but the factory whistle, we just wanted to highlight how one of the kind of nostalgic memories of the New York Wire Company was the whistle that they had.
Yes.
It's time to go to work, it would blow and people would know, and it was the rhythm of the community.
It's how people kept time.
It set the pace, and today we don't have that anymore. We lost that.
Right. You think about church bells. If you live near a church, you're always listening for that church bell to announce the hour on the hour. That's what this whistle was to a lot of people in the factory community.
And I will say, I've owned roosters. They do not crow at the exact same time. That rooster crow in the morning is
no, that's not true.
Not true. They crow whenever. But this whistle, though, was emblematic of the community all coming together, and we did lose that. So this was one of the men, Martin Ryan. There was also another man, Schmidt. I forget. We'll have to add that later. There is some disagreement on who was the person who ran the whistle, but here was one of the whistles that blew, and it was very loud. They have it available for CD here if you want to listen to it firsthand.
And you can go on YouTube as well and look up whistle concerts.
Yeah, what it sounds like. Yeah.
So this is going to bring us into World War II. So when I'm not reenacting the Civil War, I also reenact World War II. So I thought this part of the program was pretty interesting because World War II introduced us more to malaria. So I'm not even going to try to pronounce I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but don't go to bed with Anne was a popular slogan during World War II, and I think Anne is a much better name than whatever this word is. So if you're a doctor or you really like Grey's Anatomy, comment and tell me the pronunciation. So wire cloth became a necessity when we were sending soldiers to foreign wars. And they were contracting malaria, and we had to find a way to counteract this in the South Pacific theater. So malaria usually wasn't deadly for our soldiers, but it had long-lasting effects, and soldiers were out of commission just like they had an injury. So you're sending these soldiers to the doctor, they're having to get medication, they're having to get rest. So, they're not on top of their game. So, fixing these soldiers up and getting them in good health was at the top of our list for the war effort. So mosquitoes breed in damp, swampy environments, and that was what the South Pacific Islands were like. And it was an ideal breeding ground. So you're thinking about the fact that these soldiers were in foxholes. There were ruts created in the ground from all of the tanks and the jeeps going through. So those are going to collect water, and it's going to give a perfect place for mosquitoes to breed. And then they're going to infect the soldiers that are hunkered down there or walking through, and they're going to carry that parasite, and it's going to go into their bloodstream, and it's going to go from one guy to the next guy, one down the line, until your entire regiment basically has malaria. So each new person infected became a carrier through which more mosquitoes could pick up the disease. So the mosquitoes are going from soldier to soldier, the soldiers are going across the islands, and pretty soon everyone has malaria.
Yeah, infections ballooned, very difficult to fight. Not going to read this either, but there's this really funny Army booklet. We have brilliant writers in American history.
World War II had some of the best propaganda and slogans. Yep. I mean, they were just genius.
Well, and they're talking about Anne and how she jabs the beak of her nose and drills into you, trying to scare soldiers into realizing the importance.
Anne was a lady you didn't want to meet in the Pacific Islands.
So according to the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center, approximately 24,000 out of the 75,000 American Filipino troops came down with malaria. That is approximately 60 to 65% of soldiers were out of commission because they contracted malaria.
So you can see why it was such a prominent issue and why we really put it at the top of our list for trying to get this under control.
And they approached it 4 different ways to combat the mosquito crisis. They would drain a lot of the standing water, spray using DDT. Now we know how dangerous that was for health, but at the time they didn't understand that.
Hindsight is 20/20.
Right, they would fill in the water so the mosquitoes couldn't breed.
Right.
And finally, screening, screens. So here is a picture of the Army Red Cross where they would have a lot of the supplies, and even the people that were working in there were not safe, but now we have screens.
Right. The last thing you want is for all of your nurses that are treating the men with malaria to
also
contract
get
malaria.
Out of all the screens made, 2/3 came from York County.
Which is
2/3
amazing.
of all the screens in the South Pacific, right here.
It goes back to an internationally known company.
Yeah, we saved lives.
It did, yeah. It's amazing. The war effort was, a responsibility of everyone at the time. So
Well, and they even, because of the metal shortages, realized that they could make plastic screens.
amazing.
Yeah, because they didn't have metal because they were using it for the war effort.
Yeah, so we went from horsehair to metal wire to plastic.
And then back to metal after the war was
Yeah.
over. Yeah.
So then we're going to move into the 21st century, and the fact that things were still changing, moving and grooving, and after the war there were more modern uses for the mesh, and it blocked radiation, patches for holding muscles together in surgery, durable meal fencing in industrial parks, and the industry became more and more competitive, and you needed more skilled workers. And then there was the changing demographic within York City. You went from the men and women that we showed you in the 1910s pictures, and then you had a larger Latino demographic, and then that changed to a larger Asian demographic. So the look of the workers were changing, and who we were hiring and who was working.
Which again is neat for investigative history.
It is,
You look at the employee records, and then that reflects immigration and how the people are treated.
Yeah,
just
you
by the
had
last
all of
names.
these German last names, and then you had all of the Latino last names, and then you're going to start seeing the Asian last names and see the demographics changing in the city and then in the industry. And then we get to the 2010s, and that's when the New York Wire closes its massive plant on East Market Street. And even though they closed, wire cloth is still being made. I passed it on my way here, and that's IWM, and they're still working and making wire screening in York County.
Yeah, in Locks Mill, and then also down in Hanover as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. So today, come down to see the New York Wire Company. They were purchased in 2019.
Yes.
The factory has now been the home to artists and different makers, craftspeople, entrepreneurs, business owners, and really showing the power of the community and how we harness each other to push each other towards our common dreams. Galleries are super cool. They have still spaces available for rent. If you're an artist watching this, you can come down and bring your stuff available. Consignment. They had a cafe. They're going to reopen.
I'm excited
yeah,
about the
they're
cafe.
changing it. So lots of opportunity. And then of course,
The feral cat.
I mean, I are cat moms, so
Yes.
we have a soft spot for cats.
I just think this is so cool because I think a lot of people, especially in cities, look at feral cats as a nuisance. But they were important to this industry. They kept the rats and the mice away, and now even though the industry has changed, the property is no longer being used as a factory, they're not kicking the cats out, they're making it work.
Well, it's a perfect breeding ground, and like
It
historically, when you think about the creek that was close, and the railroad, and the food scraps, and so the same feral cat colony has been here for over 100 years.
Yeah.
Think about like its descendants, like some of
They
those
were
cats
here
could be.
first.
Yeah.
There's grandma cats, there's great grandpa cats out
Yeah,
there.
right. So Mr. Sherman, the owner of this, he is also, I was talking to him earlier, a cat lover, and so they have worked towards trapping, neutering, and spaying, and then
Yes.
releasing programs. They have veterinary care, so it's not like it's just like cats running around.
Yeah, it's
you
not
know.
a free-for-all. They're doing it the right way. They're controlling
Yeah.
the population, but they're giving the cats that were already here a safe, loving home.
Yeah. It's also a place for festivals and events. So here is Meredith. She is one of the marketing directors who is in charge of this with her beautiful son.
Oh, he's so
And
cute.
they had a face painting day and festivals, so you can come down here and bring your family.
That's
as
the
well.
best advertising they can do is showing that cute little
Right,
face.
I know.
Yeah.
So finally, will the factory whistle return?
So there's a quote that I want to read because it's really important, and it's the current owner of New York Wire, Mark Sherman, and he said, "We have a goal of bringing it back to our property so that the annual Christmas morning whistle concert can once again be held here. To this effort, we are currently in communications with the members of the Whistle Committee, and CDs of the steam whistle are also available for purchase inside the York Merchant." So, you know, one of these days it's going to come back.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
So again,
hopefully.
our takeaways. We hope that after you leave this presentation, you can see that we, during a time of crisis, during World War II, did not let that opportunity go to waste. We created a lot of jobs. We're instrumental in the York plan that also saved a lot of lives. We have this vision of constantly adapting and reusing. And again, we've seen that. There's a horse, to the metal, to the plastic, to the metal, to now an artisan space. The York Wire Company was the top of its class. Again, it was just a factory down the street,
Yes.
but instrumental in changing the world. And then finally, you can support it now by coming down and shopping. Christmas is not around the corner, but it will be soon.
Christmas in July.
Christmas, yeah.
6 months until Christmas, which I hate to say, but it's true.
Our next episode is going to be next month.
Yeah, we're going to be at the Yorktown, and I mean synonymous with York, and everyone knows the Yorktown, so if you want to learn more history about it, tune in next month.